Hi, and welcome to Conductor, where we are two sisters on a mission to amplify female voices on the podium. Join us as we interview leaders in the field of choral music, share resources, and build a community for current and future teacher conductors, all while exploring the gender divide.
I'm Kyra Starr.
And I'm McKenna Stenson.
And we are Conductor. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Conductor podcast. We are so excited to have Dr. Iris Levine on with us today. Dr. Levine, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, really.
We have a little bit about Iris Levine's. I'm trying to say Iris and not feel weird about it. We're working on it. A little bit about her background to share before we dive into some of our questions. So, nationally recognized for her excellence in choral conducting, Dr. Iris Levine is the founder and artistic director of VOX Femina Los Angeles, LA's premier women's chorus. And if you don't know about them, you should immediately go to the internet and find out because they are phenomenal. Through her extensive experience with women's choral literature and innovative concert programming, Dr. Levine has charted VOX Femina on an impressive journey, building its prominence in the choral community by way of numerous appearances at ACDA conventions, Chorus America conferences, and over 300 appearances throughout the United States, Mexico, and Canada.
Having recently completed her service as the interim provost and vice president of academic affairs at Cal State Polytechnic University in Pomona, Dr. Levine now serves as the special assistant to the president. Dr. Levine previously served as dean of the College of Letters, Arts, and Social Sciences, interim dean of the College of Education and Integrative Studies, and department chair and professor of music at Cal Poly Pomona. As faculty, she conducted the Kellogg Chamber Singers, taught beginning conducting, choral conducting, and music education courses. Dr. Levine earned her doctorate in choral music from the University of Southern California under the tutelage of Rod Eichenberger and James Vail, and she holds a master's degree in choral conducting from Temple University in Philadelphia, where she studied with Alan Harler. Dr. Levine is the editor for the Iris S. Levine Treble Choral Series with Pavan Publishing, and she recently made a rather big announcement today regarding her career, if you want to share with us.
Yes, I announced today that as of July 1, I am retiring from Cal Poly Pomona after 32 years of service there. So it's pretty amazing, I will tell you. You know, when I was thinking about it too, it's not just 32 years there, but all of the teaching I did prior to that, you know, because I taught in the public schools, I taught in private schools. So it's about 40 years of teaching. I was 2 when I started, by the way.
Congratulations. That's an illustrious career as a 2-year-old.
Never fear, though, because she will still be artistic director of VOX Femina, which is fantastic. And I love attending their concerts as a Los Angeles resident.
So if I could just jump in there for a minute so that everybody knows, it's actually VOX Femina. So that, so that we don't continue in that role. So
we will also.
And you are not the first to have done that. I will say that.
Would you describe how that came, the origin of that name? That's not a question we have, and this is totally off the charts. But since we're talking about it, I would love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. When we first started with VOX, it was in 1997, and I had been meeting with then the artistic director of the Gay Men's Chorus, John Bailey, and he had been asking me for years to start a women's chorus in Los Angeles, and he kept saying to me, I wanted to have a partner. I wanted to, really mirror GMCLA. And I kept saying, no, I don't want 200 singers and in this massive kind of thing. This is not what I want at all. So I kept just pushing him off. And finally, through our conversations, he called me one day and he said, can we have lunch? And I said, okay. I'm thinking we're going to have the same conversation. And we went to lunch and he said, I just came back from a conference and all of the best choirs that I heard for women's choruses were the small ones. So I get what you're talking about now. And, I said to him, that really what we wanted was to have a group that was no larger than 40 singers. That to me is like where it starts to shift, to a larger ensemble. And so we began to work together to try to determine what the makeup of this ensemble was going to be. And one of those things, of course, was announcing a name. oh my God, we went back and forth and all kinds of stuff. And, sort of traditionally at that time in the mid 90s or so, it was, such and such women's chorus, San Diego women's chorus. And we have right here under Eliza Rubinstein, fantastic Orange County women's chorus. So many of the cities had women's chorus in their name. It just seemed so flat to me for what I wanted. I wanted to lift this up a little bit. So we started looking in other languages about the word for voice, the word for woman, the word for, all these kinds of things. We put all these things out on the table. And it was actually, I want to give a shout out to Lisa Sylvester, who works at USC, who came up with Vox Femina. And we all went, yeah, we kind of like that. And at the time, we had heard that there was another Vox Femina that was in Canada. And at first, when we started, it was Vox Femina. And then we heard from them and said, you can't have that name. That's our name. And so we just elongated it then and to make it VOX Femina Los Angeles. So the official name is VOX Femina Los Angeles. Oftentimes we go by Vox, VOX Femina, all kinds of things. But that's how the name came about. And we are always grateful to my dear friend, Lisa Sylvester, for that.
I haven't had a chance to take any classes with Dr. Sylvester, but I have heard amazing things. So maybe I'll hunt her down and tell her that. You say hello.
And also what power to the hive mind that everybody
That's
put
right.
their heads together. I mean, that's how you get the best results so often. And great minds have come together to create this. So thank you for sharing that.
All right, so we are going to dive back into our regularly scheduled programming and ask you our first question, which is, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you came to choral music.
I am the youngest of 3 children in my family, 2 other girls ahead of me in the family. My mother was a total lover of the arts, music, theater. She taught theater for a while. And she actually, when she and my father got married, she said to him that the first piece of furniture that she wanted in the house was a piano. So they didn't have, a dime to their name kind of thing, but somehow or another were able to purchase a piano to have as their first piece of furniture. My father was an optometrist, so he came from the medical side. And as we were growing up, all of us had piano lessons and stuff like that. And my sisters are like, yeah, whatever, I'm done. And for me, it was sort of my escape. It was the place that I went to when I was emotional about anything, happy, sad, you name it. I sat down at the piano and I played. And I remember that my mom tried to get me to have piano lessons when I was very, very young. And she took me to a piano teacher and he said, can she read yet? And my mom said, no. I mean, I was that young. And he said, come back when she can read. And so, I was 5 at that point, or 5 or 6 or something. And so we went back and we started piano lessons at that time. And it was always my love, always. So and my parents very much supported, my interest in music. As a matter of fact, when I was in high school, you take all these tests that sort of say, what are you good at? Because, and I was one of those jack of all trades kind of people. I love doing this and I love doing that. I mean, I played on the basketball team. I thought at one point I was going to go into kinesiology and health promotion because I wanted to really play basketball for the rest of my life. Not realizing that at 5'4", that wasn't going to happen. But, so I had a lot of interests and I was quite frankly good at a lot of different kinds of things. So I remember my guidance counselor saying to me, let's do one of those tests that, can really determine where your interests lie. So I took one of these tests, got the results, came home and said to my mom, and I was, I think, a junior or a senior in high school. I was a senior, probably was early in there. And I said, well, the tests say that I should be an accountant.
What?
And I remember my mother saying to me at the time, because we lived near Boston. I grew up right outside of Boston. And Boston, as you may know, has probably more universities and colleges than any city in the country, right? And so I remember her saying to me, if you want to be an accountant, you can live at home and go to school in Boston. If you want to go to school for music, we'll send you anywhere you want. Now, what parent does that? Most of them, it's the opposite, right?
Awesome. Did the opposite.
Exactly right. Exactly the opposite, but not my mother. I will tell you, she was so supportive of me to go into music, and she loved the fact that I pursued a career in music. And so I went off to school, as an undergrad at the University of New Hampshire. And I can tell you that was the first time that I ever sang in a choir. Because I was the pianist for the choir at my high school. And so it was the first time I really sang in a choir was at the University of New Hampshire. And I learned so many things at that time, like, whoa, you have to what? What language is this? I mean, I didn't grow up in the church. I was Jewish. I am Jewish. I shouldn't say was. I am Jewish. And so I didn't grow up in the church. And the first thing, you hand out a Schubert Mass. And I'm like, what is this? And all of my friends around me are like, we got you. So I had a wonderful support system in my undergraduate program, and quickly loved all of the music courses that I took. I didn't come in as a music major. I came in as an undeclared major and spoke with then the department chair when I was at orientation, because I was told you can't take any music courses if you're not a music major. So now, having been a chair of the music department, I understand why that is. But so I remember meeting with the department chair, and I said to him, I really want to take some music courses. I was accepted as a music major in other universities, but I decided to come here. And music is something that I'm considering, but I don't know if it's what I want to pursue. So we talked for a long time, and he signed me up for all these music courses. And then soon after that, I became a major. And it was fantastic. Such a great community. I had a fantastic conducting teacher in my undergraduate program. And I still think back to some of the things that he taught me, because he was such a fantastic technician that it created a foundation for me that allowed me to grow from there. So that's how I started.
That is an amazing path. Like incredibly unique, some crossover with a few other people we've interviewed, but I mean, it's just been fascinating to hear from everyone how we all got to this point in this specific career, because it is truly unique. And I love that your mother was so foundational in setting you on this path. I mean, we have a similar situation where both of our parents are musicians, and it's very special to have someone care about that and encourage you in the field.
And they always said, if you want to do this, it has to be the thing that you want to do. Like you can't think you maybe want to be this or this or this. In the end, you have to say, like, this will be my whole life, not just my work, but my whole life. So really interesting to hear another musical parent conversation and how this dialogue went. You sort of talked about a couple of the events that were instrumental for you to choose music as your career. But who or what was who really? Like, are there mentors or other people that come to mind who were helpful to you along this journey? And how did you know this was a lifelong pursuit and not just something that you were interested in, but this was going to be your career?
So when I graduated from the University of New Hampshire, I had a degree in music education, and I knew that I wanted to teach. So I taught for 3-4 years or whatever. Maybe 3-5 years. I don't know, something like that. I taught elementary school first, and then I went into teaching grades 4 through 12, all choral music. So I was my own feeder everywhere. Wow. And that was fabulous. It was a small town, and had a really great experience there.
Were you teaching in New Hampshire as well? Okay, just checking.
I was teaching in Durham, New Hampshire, which is where the university is. So it was really a wonderful situation for me. And for a first-time teacher to be around there, nothing better, I'll tell you. But then I decided I wanted to go on for an advanced degree. And I had the wonderful experience of having Janet Yamron, who was at Temple University, And I don't know if Tram spoke about her as well, but Janet came to do like an honor choir working with all of us when I was at the University of New Hampshire. And I remember really loving working with this woman. And so when it came time to look for a master's program, I contacted her. And she said, "Oh, you need to come work with Alan Harler. That's really who you need to come work with. I'm here, but you really need to come work with him." And so I applied to go to Temple University for my master's degree. And that's what was life-changing. That's when I knew that there was so much depth to studying music. That's when I knew, quite frankly, the difference between sort of teaching every day, going into the schools and teaching every day, and really developing myself as a conductor and as a musician. Alan is the person who changed my life. And I will always be grateful to him for that. And he knows it. And I tell him all the time how much I love him.
And isn't that the best, to be able to call up your mentor and say, thank you. This is because of you. You were influential.
Yeah. And so, I had 2 years there at Temple University and had amazing opportunities there. And, following that, I taught in the private schools for a while. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to go back into teaching or if I wanted to go on to get the doctorate. And I decided, after I'd taken one more year of teaching in a private school, that I wanted to go back. And so Alan at the time and I, talked about where to go, and Janet and I talked about where to go. And Janet's always been such a wonderful influence for me. But Janet said to me, "You need to study with someone who is completely different than Alan, because you need to broaden your experiences." And she was right. She was absolutely right. So she suggested that I come to USC to work with Rod. And Rod was totally different than Alan, totally different. And so when I went to work with him, it was like I felt like I was a sponge, picking up all of this incredible information. And then, and I would say this to my students when I went out to teach afterwards. I would say to them, you need to be that sponge, and then you need to every so often sort of just wring the sponge a little bit and determine what stays with you and what is not going to work for you. And
I love that. I love that.
Because, for me, you must continue to always learn. And so when I watch other people, I watch some of the things that they do, and I take it all in. And then I leave with, oh, I liked that, and that. And I think it's really important that we just continue to learn all the time. And there's such a fantastic choral community from whom we can learn. And so, why not, right? Why not? I truly believe that we're not competing with each other, that we are part of a wonderful community that supports each other. And I love when I can call upon colleagues and say, can you just watch a rehearsal? Things aren't going well and I need some help. And they're right there. And the same thing I would do for them in a minute. And so, along this journey, I have met a lot of really good people. And I think it's, like I say, I think it's really important that you develop your choral community, you feed it, you glean from it, and you continue to learn all the time.
There was so much wisdom to just unpack from all of that. Oh, that was beautiful. We have been talking about this theme of community in the past several episodes, and that's been one of the best parts about this podcast, is getting to hear from each of you and glean a little bit of the wisdom from all of these amazing people in our field, and you are absolutely one of them. So just know that we are inspired just by hearing your words.
I just want to say, I also think that, while the pandemic has been horrific for us because we haven't been able to really show our art form, the good thing that it has been is allowing us to connect with people all over the world. And so, when I might call someone and say, would you come talk to my singers about such and such? Sure, they can stay in their PJs if they want, for God's sakes, right? And they can do it, and then we can just get on a Zoom call and do that. I mean, it's been one of the great takeaways from this pandemic. And it adds to that community then.
And Vox was so influential in that, even from at that point in the pandemic, I was still in Virginia. And I remember seeing what happens when a woman, the lead into the suffragette cantata. And I was like, oh, there's still art. There's still art. It can still happen. And that was just so moving. So this art is affecting people throughout the United States and beyond. And that's the power of music and what we can do, whether it's in person or not.
Right.
And so that was extremely moving.
Yeah, that was a big undertaking.
I just saw the ACDA performance of the suffrage cantata, and it was absolutely stunning. And there was even a technical difficulty at the beginning that you handled so beautifully in that moment. And I was like, yes, look at her up there, just coasting like a queen. She's confident, she's calm, cool, collected. Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. And McKenna was a student of Andrea Ramsey. So it's been very special to get to watch that kind of consortium appear across the country. It's been very, very cool to follow, at least on social media.
Yeah, it has been all over, but when we first started, Andrea had all these people and we had sort of put this consortium together, and then she kept getting all these phone calls from people saying, can't do it, can't do it, can't do it, because of the pandemic. And so when I called her, she thought I was going to say the same thing. And I called her and I said, Andrea, I want to make a film out of this. And she's like, what? And she told me it was like a lifeline for her, because she was in the midst of writing all of this. And every time someone kept saying, no, 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 it just kept wearing her down. And how could she be creative? And I said, but if we make a film, I need to tell you that the deadlines that we created, they need to move up. So we worked together, and I'll tell you, I have such incredible respect for that woman, such respect for her. It was a great partnership.
So leading in, we have so many questions for you, and we only have an hour. But you have been such a musical giant in our field and so inspirational in so many ways, and you transitioned to the position of dean. So going from doing choral music every day in the classroom to this more administrative position. Would you describe what that experience has been like, and what you feel the impact of the administrative side is in our choral field?
Well, let me first say that a colleague of mine, when I moved into the position of dean, a colleague of mine wrote to me and said, I can't believe that you've gone to the dark side. And I wrote back to him and I said to him, actually, and I didn't call it the dark side, I said, actually, administration needs people like me, and you should want people like me in administration. We're
clapping, everyone. We're just clapping really loud in our different homes across the United States.
So, that's my take on it. I think, we talk about diversity and how the name for Vox came about, but we also need to talk about diversity within administration. And if it's only those people who have been brought up through colleges of business or, political science, those are the ones who usually go into kinds of administrative positions, because it's part of what they do, right? Management and human resources. They learn that, and then they go on into administrative position. Same kind of thing in political science. It often happens. And, for me, I say that, being dean is like being a choral director. I'm bringing a whole lot of people together to make something fantastic. And I have to figure out how to fund it. So I'm out there talking with people and advocating for my program. And I want to make sure that people at every level, for me, it was students, faculty, and staff, succeed. And the same kind of thing when you're teaching. Your freshmen, your juniors, your seniors, they all have different needs. So you want to make sure that they all succeed. You want to make sure that those who are in your beginning group succeed, and those who are in your, your highest group, you have different goals for each one of them. So what's the difference here? So I really think that being a choral director relates quite strongly with leadership in administration, because we are leaders as choral directors. Now, for me, the good thing about it was that when I left the classroom and became dean, I still had VOX. So I didn't lose out on making art for myself. Had that been something that I would have had to give up, not sure I would have done it.
That was going to be a follow-up question for this exact statement. Was that at all influential in your decision to?
Well, I remember when I interviewed for the position, when I first came in as associate dean, and I interviewed with the dean, excuse me, and I said to her, I just want you to know I'm not willing to give this up. And she said, no worries, you're going to be working with me, and I understand that you're doing this. I mean, VOX doesn't impact the day schedule. It's only in the evening or on weekends. And then when I interviewed through the national search for becoming dean, I remember saying to my president, you need to know that this is something that's very important to me. Both the president and the provost, actually, at the time. And both of whom were women, both of them said to me, well, this is your scholarship. This is your creative activity. You should be continuing with this. We want you to continue, because then you understand how to keep up with scholarship and creative activities, as opposed to telling your faculty they have to do it. You are the model then for this. And even when I became provost, I said to my president, I know that this job is going to be all encompassing, but I also want you to know that I'm still not going to give up VOX. And this is someone who came to my performances and has been a donor of VOX. And she's like, well, I'm hoping you're going to tell me about the performances so I can be there.
Oh, it's amazing. She's saying, I hope you don't. Thanks.
Yeah. So I will tell you, I was fortunate in that I call them my bosses, but the people for whom I worked were all extremely supportive of my artistic side as I continued on the administrative side. And I said to them, that's what's going to keep me happy. You need to know that.
I think that's so powerful, everything that you just shared. And I think so often, at least in academia right now, I hear a lot of wonderful mentors saying, well, you don't want to get too far in the administrative side of things. You want to make sure you keep, this is your profile. You're building your creative profile. You're building your profile. And I think back to some of my best bosses, the people in leadership, and it's people who have this creative outlet and who've been a part of the arts, because they understand not only people moving, but how to build community, how to make people want to come together and work together. And we've spoken to Hillary Applestraw on the podcast earlier in the season about leadership. And I think this is really empowering to so many people to hear you speak about the importance of this and encouragement of this. So it's really exciting to hear everything that you just said.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to see more musicians go into administrative, because I mean, the other thing is, as I'm now leaving those positions, and one of the things that I've said to my faculty in my college is, you've had it lucky, because I understand what it takes to put on theater productions. I understand what it takes for music. I understand, all of those things. You didn't have to explain all of that to me. And therefore I have helped to fund those kinds of things and provided, in every way I could for you. Others, people who come in, they like, you do what? Your staff stay after hours and do things?
Yeah, what a luxury for them. I mean, hopefully a luxury that continues to be more and more accessible and less rare.
Right.
But it is amazing to see you in that position and to know that that is an opportunity and something that could be in our future, and we shouldn't shy away from it, but rather think like, what an opportunity for us to then be representative and have a different perspective. Yes. So speaking about, identity and kind of your experience as a woman in academia, I was wondering if you might feel comfortable sharing what your experience has been in this field, particularly within academia, but also in terms of, your high school and middle school teaching and anything else you'd want to share, being a young queer female person.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I began teaching at the high school, actually at the elementary school, but the kids in the elementary school wouldn't, that wasn't going to be anything to talk about. But when I was teaching at the high school, it was very difficult for me. And this was in the early 80s, well before all of you were born. But when I began teaching there, and you couldn't talk about being gay. You just could not talk about it. And so, I lived, a secret life. There's no doubt about that. And I had many students who I knew were gay, but I had one particular student who would come to talk with me all the time. And I'm in touch with him still today. But he would come to talk with me, and he knew that he was gay. And he knew that his mother was gay. But his mother wouldn't tell him that she was gay. And they didn't talk about it. And he kept saying to me, I don't understand why she can't talk to me about it. Why we can't have this open conversation. And here I am listening to this and thinking, what a hypocrite you are. That's what I was thinking about myself, because I couldn't tell him anything. And yet I suspect that there were reasons that he came to talk with me, right? And maybe even there were reasons that he came to talk with me and say, I don't know why she's not telling me. But I still couldn't, because it was New Hampshire in the early 80s, and I could have lost my job.
Wow. Let's just let that resonate for a minute and think about where we are today, and how challenging that must have been. Okay, keep going.
So when I went to Temple University, that's when I moved from New Hampshire down to Philly. And I decided never again. I was not doing this. Everybody was going to know that I was a lesbian. It was like, I am not doing this anymore. And I remember I got offered a job after I finished that, because remember I said I took 1 year off after that. And I got offered a job, and it was at a residential school. And they told me that I would have to live there. And I said, nope. It was an all-girls school. And they told me I would have to live there. I'm like,
oh, no.
Nope. And they said, well, that's the only way we'll offer you this job. And I said, I won't take the job, because I was not living a lie again. And so that was not going to happen.
We're so grateful that you decided to be so open and vulnerable. And I don't know how that feels, but I'm so thrilled that you were able to go to Temple and to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
And I imagine that was a pivotal moment.
Yeah. And then when I graduated, USC was fine. Nobody cared, by that time, nobody cared. Right. And then when I because my first teaching job, my first tenure track teaching job was at Cal Poly. So I've been there for my entire career.
Wow.
And so I remember I had interviewed for the position. I was offered the position, and the person who was then the director of choral activities was a gay man. And so he said to me, he lived in Hollywood, and he said, I want you to come over so we can talk things out, really prepare for stuff. And, this was probably in the spring before I would start, right? And then next fall. And so I came over to his house, and he said something to me about being, it's not an issue. I'm out. It's all, all good. And I looked at him, and he said, oh yeah, and everybody knows about you too. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's good. So that was a no-brainer. I was always out with my students. It was never, I didn't walk into a classroom and say, by the way, I'm a lesbian.
That'd be a strong start, but if you want.
Right. But I never shied away from anything. If someone said to me, Dr. Levine, are you married? At the time I wasn't married, but I would say, no, I have a partner and her name is such and such. So I never shied away from any of that. I will say that as a woman, you had talked about that when I first came to Cal Poly, I was really the first tenure track female hire in the department. There were other females. They were either lecturers or there was someone else who was there as a presidential appointee. So it wasn't a tenure track line. So that's why I want to clarify that. I was the first tenure track.
What year was that?
I was just
1990. 1990. Mm-hmm. And so the students were so used to calling all of the female professors by their first name and all of the male professors by doctor. And so I remember.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like having trouble processing that.
Yeah. And I walked in and I said that my name was Dr. Levine, and they looked at me with this disdain, like, how could you possibly ask us to do that? And there were students who tried to call me Iris, and I said, nope. I said, if you want to speak to me, you will call me by my professional name. And so there was a time period where we had to make adjustments and, again, blazing the trail for all those who came after me, because there was never an issue after that. And I have a colleague who continues to say to me, how I have essentially blazed the trail for so many, because, as you say, I was always my authentic self. I'm not going to, I'm very forthright in talking about who I am, what I believe in, the importance of, that authenticity, the importance of being true to yourself. Most people don't know that I had to live a lie in my early part of the career, but I would never, ever, ever, ever go back to doing that. And if someone doesn't like it, goodbye.
Nice job.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, I very much look up to you, and I'm so honored that I just have lived the life that you have, and that you are still that authentic person. And I remember the first time I met you, I called McKenna and I was like, she is amazing. Like, she's so fierce and just like, powerful and kind, and just you radiate this energy that is, I am in control and I am excited to be here. And I mean, you're strong. You're just really strong. So thank you for all that you've done, and for saying absolutely not. I will not take that job. I am worth more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That happened once for a church job too for me. I applied for a church. I remember when I first came to USC and people said, you need to get an outside ensemble. And I'm like, okay. And they said, well, get a church job. I'm like, a church job? What do I know about getting a church job? And they said to me, oh, here, there's a Methodist church. That would be easy. It's not like some of the more rigorous or, kind of conservative. You look at this position and call them on this. So I remember calling about this position, told them a little bit about my background, and I was very forthright and about who I was. I don't think I said I was a lesbian. I did say that I was Jewish, though.
One at a time.
Right. And so the woman who was interviewing me said, well, we have communion every week. And I said, okay. And she said, you will take communion though, right? And I said, no. Did you not hear me say that I was Jewish? And from my perspective, I was thinking, doesn't that feel sacrilegious to you, that you're asking me to do something that is part of your religious tradition? I mean, that doesn't sound right to me. And so, I mean, obviously I didn't get the job, and that was fine. It was all good. Yeah, but I'm pretty open about who I am.
It's really just empowering to hear you speak. And we've been so honored to have so many incredible guests on the podcast, but the energy and the full self, like living into full self is something that I think as graduate students, you talk about that sponge. We're trying to absorb all the different things and then wring out and see what still fits.
Right.
And even just this past week, one of my teachers said, "Oh, well, you're a professor now, McKenna." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 please don't say that." And then I was like, "Well, why do I feel bad about that?
Yeah.
Why do I feel okay. So you're giving me a lot of inspiration, and I know so many others out there to start to walk in the shoes that it's our turn.
It is absolutely your turn. And that's one of the things about my retirement is like, it's now my turn to walk away. I know that there's a lot of fabulous things I want to do in my life, and I'm going to get to do them. But the time is right. And there are so many good people to step in. And I have no doubts that that will happen. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who was trying to pick some leadership for ACDA. I've served on ACDA leadership for 16 years. I served 8 years at the national level, which was probably life-changing also for me in trying to create community. And but at this point, someone said to me, "Would you consider serving on the such and such board?" And I'm like, there's other people who need to do this. Go find them, and help lift them up. I don't need to I'm happy to be a resource for you. Call me, talk to me, all of that kind of stuff. I am more than happy to talk with you. But you need to have others who are going to provide that diversity at the table. You don't need someone like me there.
Well, we disagree. We would love to have you at our table always. But absolutely, isn't that how opportunities are created? I mean, the number of times in this city alone, I've been told, well, you just don't have enough experience yet. And I'm like, well, I can't get that experience if I'm continually competing, quote unquote, with people who already have the experience. I mean, it's not going to work out. So yeah. And I know McKenna has had many opportunities because of some of her specifically female mentors recently who have said, I can't do this gig. So you're going to get McKenna Stenson and she's going to be fabulous.
That's great. And that's exactly how it should be.
Yes.
And I will just say this. I think there are more women who do that. There are some men. I don't want to say it's a, one or the other. There are some men who certainly do that. But I think it's women who think about it more. And how do we lift up others? So
I think that we'll put a period on that sentence. So you've already alluded to this a little bit about the importance of mentorship in our field. And so can you share your personal experiences with mentorship? You've talked about some people who were really important to you, and how can we continue to be better mentors in the field of choral music?
Well, one of the things that I just talked about, right, is to lift up others and invite them to do things and really honor them. I mean, I'm thrilled to have as my assistant conductor, Laurie Marie Rios, who is an extraordinary woman. And the thing is that she balances me. I don't, some people they're like, I'm not going to bring in an assistant because I don't want them to upstage me or something like that. This is not, bringing in someone for me who balances me, it was most important. And the things that she does really well, I want her to do, I can acknowledge I don't do everything well. That is not a problem for me. Right. And so I try to lift her up every week in rehearsal and to make sure that she is recognized and that she is honored in that way. I do think that as far as mentorship is, when I say to people, you can contact me, you can, Kyra.
And I have.
Right. I mean, right. You're in the same city. If there's something that you have a question about or that you're like, how can I such and such? The same kind of thing when I speak with leadership in certain areas and I say, don't ask me, ask so-and-so. And I provide people's names. I do provide people's names and say, you should talk with this person, or you should, talk with this person. I tried to honor. I mean, we just had at our last concert, Bethany Encina and the high school group from Rancho Cucamonga joining us for a new commission that was fantastic by Christina Whitten Thomas. And, and I went to work with her kids out there, and she told her kids about VOX, and they got to work with us and all kinds of stuff. And every moment I could, I mentioned how fabulous she was, because people need to know that she is fabulous.
And those small acknowledgments of, I see you and you're doing great work. That can be so powerful, because there is so much else, I'm sure, like most fields, that just can bog you down, and you can lose that a little bit. You can lose the joy a little bit. And sometimes it takes a person saying, you're really great. And that can really flip things around.
That's right. And I will say this, in the past couple of years, especially pre-pandemic, when I was working as dean, and then obviously in these past few years, I haven't had the opportunity to go out as much into the schools or do as many honor choirs. I'm doing another one this fall, but I haven't had the opportunity because of my job. But I am happy to have people say, can you just come work with my group for a little bit? Be great, especially now when I'm going to have some time.
A small plug. She's available.
I'm just saying. And every single time that I do go to work with people, I talk to the students about how great their director is.
I will say my first All-State as a high school teacher, where I took students to, you were the clinician in Virginia at Virginia.
Oh, yes.
With Mrs. Edelbrock at the keyboard. And it was life-changing, specifically to see the empowerment that you brought to the treble voices, because oftentimes in a all-state situation, the treble voices feel less than.
Right.
And that performance was on fire.
That was on fire.
It was so good. And so I just remember I had one student in the treble ensemble and one student in the SATB ensemble. And although she didn't, say anything bad about her experience, she just said to me, wow, Miss Denson, the trebles were so passionate, and it was a really apparent, the energy that you poured into those students, and you did a beautiful job of always lifting, complimenting the directors who got them there. Yeah. And that as a teacher was just special, and very appreciated.
Yeah, that was a great All-State. And Laura Edelbrock and I went to school at UNH together, at the University of New Hampshire together.
Oh, we knew this. I was like, this is going to be my in. We did it. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, well, this is somewhat related, but I have had the privilege to attend a VOX rehearsal earlier this year, and just the amount of women who came up to me of all ages, I had a woman who came up and was just like holding my hands and just saying, I am so glad you're here to learn from Iris. Isn't she amazing? So let me just feed a little bit of that back to you and tell you that you are directly impacting their lives every week. And I'm sure you're aware of that. And we talked a little bit, of course. We talked a little bit about VOX and specifically the name and how that came to be in the convincing of you, which I'm so glad it worked, to finally do this ensemble and create this. Can you talk a little bit about why you felt there was a need for this type of ensemble, and B, your experience programming repertoire for treble voices?
Sure. I will say that I didn't know that there was a need. I'm just going to be very frank. It was John, right? It was John Bailey who had said to me, I really want there to be a group which is going to parallel Gaiman's Chorus. And I was like, nah, but, and I had never led a treble ensemble. So I was like jumping in the deep end. And
trial by fire.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is that he said to me, I just want you to know, at that time, he said to me, this is going to change your life. And it
I
did.
just got goosebumps all over my body because I was like, watching you lead Treble Voices was like watching the most organic thing I've ever seen. Not that you're not incredible with SATB voices.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But there are some directors who bring flowers, and there are some directors that bring the full spectrum of feeling. And that's what was so exceptional, that those singers knew, oh, we're going to touch on the full embodiment of what it means to be a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's also just you, but yes.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I hadn't, like I said, and it did change my life, and it became all of my scholarship. I mean, because everything that I did then was about, referencing and resourcing and learning about repertoire and learning about how to work with the treble voices and learning about how to create community choirs and learning about, I just dove right in the deep end. And when you talk about repertoire, when I first started, here's a funny story. I love telling little funny stories every so often. VOX started in January of 1997. We had our first rehearsal, I think it was the third week of January. Prior to that, we had made an announcement about it starting, and I was contacted by the International Association of Women in Music. And I was told that there was going to be an international festival, which was going to be held at Cal Arts. And it was like in April. And would VOX sing at it? I had not even auditioned a single voice yet. And I said yes.
You're like, we have an email almost set up. So let's hear
Right.
it.
And this was going to be actually a Hildegard conference. And so I said yes. What was I going to do? Like, say no?
Hearing you talk about, well, yeah, I hadn't done this before, and I just figured it out. I feel like that's something that every teacher needs to hear.
Yeah.
I hadn't done this before, so I learned, and I
Yeah.
figured it out, and I asked for help, and I, got my How to Start a Community Choir for Dummies book, whatever it is. But you dove in. And I think that that's really inspirational, and something that our music education students, it's like, well, what happens in this situation? You learn.
Right.
You learn.
It's interesting. I want to tie back into my position as provost, because when I stepped into that position, the previous provost left me a note, which was so beautiful. But one of the things that she said was, always stay to your values. When you make decisions which are based upon your values, you will succeed. And so even in starting a community choir, I looked at what my values were. And I didn't even know until right now, I'm saying, to make that connection. But I knew that I wanted it to be an auditioned choir. I knew that I wanted it to be open to all women. But I also knew that I wanted it to have a strong place in the gay and lesbian community. And I wanted it to be a safe place for those who identified as lesbian or bisexual. And so those were my values. And so as I began that group, that was, part of how I made those decisions, when we're talking about that.
Sorry, go ahead, McKenna.
I feel a two-part episode coming on. But just to make sure that we get through all of our questions today, one question that we have asked every person on the podcast is about discrimination. Mm-hmm. So would you be willing to share a time when you faced discrimination? And for our listeners, what suggestions or advice would you have to overcome this type of adversity?
I just want to say that I've been really fortunate. I know that a number of years ago, there was a really fantastic book, Women and Conductors. I don't remember right now what the name of it was.
Wisdom, Wit, and Will.
Yes. Really fantastic book. And I remember being at an ACDA National and sitting there listening to this about the book. And there was a panel who were discussing various chapters of it. And I remember thinking, I haven't had these experiences. So in my position at Cal Poly Pomona, I have always felt that I was treated equally. I mean, part of the CSU, the California State University system, is equal treatment. I mean, when you come in on a tenure track line, and it doesn't matter if you are white, black, brown, Jew, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter, male, female, doesn't matter, any of those things. Everybody comes in on that line. The only thing that changes that line is the number of teaching years that you might have had before you come. And so even when I, as dean, would interview potential faculty candidates, and I would say to them, I would explain that to them about where they're coming in, and then of course I would have some people who say, well, I really think that I should be at this place. And I'm like, if you really heard me, you would have appreciated what I was saying here, because the fact is that we don't discriminate. We bring people in all at the same place. And so I've been really fortunate in that particular area. I will say, though, that I have had, and ACD is much better. I just want to make sure I start off with this. But I have had situations in ACDA earlier on where there clearly was discrimination, both gender and religious. And I called it out. I remember standing
Good
up.
for you.
I remember standing up at a national board meeting and calling it out to everybody. And, and people were like, oh my God, I can't believe she's saying these things. And I did. And I don't need to repeat that now, what I said, but it really let people know that there was this view of ACDA that was only for a certain group of people. So that's why I started by saying ACDA is much better. Okay. And there's been a lot of really good growth. There's a lot more to take.
I was just going to say, I feel like we're in the next phase of that right now, that ACDA is really working to be a more representative group to show what is happening throughout our entire country. And so I know that that is starting to happen. And it's going to take people who are willing to give time and give back to the organization from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds and all different experiences. So your leadership plugs today have been heard.
And it's also going to take ACDA to have a mirror in front of them.
Absolutely.
All the time.
All the time.
And say, is this the way we want to do business? And I think that this is happening. That's what I'm saying. I'm encouraged by some of the moves that are happening for ACDA, but they have to be genuine, and they just can't check a box. It just has to be genuine, because people will see through it in a minute.
Well said. Well said. We have a great episode where we interview a graduate student at Cal State Fullerton who has done her research on the gender divide in our field and has a lot of very interesting data. And she was like, yeah, College Music Society was really, really helpful.
ACDA, not so.
Yeah, I mean, I
was part of that research project.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear it. Turns out there are less women in the field now. So that is discouraging. And somewhat related, we have one more real question for you, and then just really quick, a fast five at the end.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you, because you have had such wonderful words today, what is a piece of advice that you would give to young women in our field?
Be authentic. That's the first thing that I would say. Determine what truly matters for you and follow your heart. Don't let somebody else tell you that you have to do such and such, or you have to, whatever. You have to figure out what truly matters to you. Be authentic, go forward. Don't let anybody get tell you can't do something, find good mentors, all those messages that I've talked about today.
I think this is going to be just like the podcast that I repeat all summer long. Like, wait, what did Iris say? Let's go back, play it again. It's really difficult, I think, sometimes in our field to hang on to that when you are getting a lot of pressure from all sides to be more like this or to be more like this, or you're going through graduate school and you're in that phase where you're supposed to try on different things. But within that, something that we talk about a lot, at least in my cohort, is, but who are you? And does this work with you and who you are and how you connect with people? And so that's such a great reminder for everyone.
When I started VOX, there was another woman who was conducting another women's choir elsewhere in the country. And she said to me, "You're going to need to find your niche for VOX." And I said, "Well, we like doing a lot of different kinds of music. We like doing Hildegard, and we like doing some pop stuff. We like commissioning. We definitely want to commission new works. We like doing, And she said, "No, you're going to have to find that niche." And I just want you to know, 25 years later, we're still doing all that stuff.
I was going to say, I'm so glad you did not follow that advice. So our last couple questions here are fast five. These are things that we are asking everybody. We have learned that some are faster than others, so you take your time. But the concept here is that we just shout it out, and whatever first comes to your brain is the right answer. Okay. So the first one is, what is your current favorite choral octavo or a choral composer that you're really enjoying right now?
I love the works of Jocelyn Hagan. I just want to say that. Love the works of Jocelyn Hagan. I will also say that, we just did Christina Whitten Thomas's piece, and she writes beautifully for VOX, and people need to know her writing.
We're trying to compile a list of resources and people, so we will make sure to amplify both of those voices.
Yeah.
Number 2, what is one misconception about you?
That I am so strong and, she can handle everything. There's a soft part of me too.
That is the vibe you give off. And I feel a similar vibe is often interpreted for myself. And that was kind of my misconception. I was like, I am kind and sensitive too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just feel everything all the time, very much in front of everyone. So we all have our strengths. What would be one word to describe you leading an ensemble?
One word. Oh my God.
I know. We thought they'd be fast.
I have to tell you that as I've been going through this retirement thing, and I've had all kinds of interviews, and my colleagues were interviewed about me, and students were interviewed, and alumni were, all these different things. But all of them said that I had very high standards. And they always wanted to do well for me. So that's, and I hope that I always come to the podium ready to make fabulous music and bring people in with me to do that same thing.
You are retiring, so you can have as many words as you want. All of those were brilliant and so true. So true.
Yeah, our mom is also retiring at the end of this year from her teaching career, and I'm excited for her to listen to this episode because I think it will give her a refreshed and excited spirit moving forward. So,
good.
Yes. All right, number 4. What is a favorite choral memory?
Conducting Brahms' Requiem with, this was at the university at Cal Poly. It was a combination of chamber singers and concert choir. And I had some alumni who joined as well, full orchestra. I had 2 students who sang the solos, which was really quite wonderful. And I remember sitting in my office before getting dressed and going out there and just sitting there looking at the score. And I remember thinking I wasn't worthy. And I had to get myself out of that, But that piece, there is so much in that piece. And it will always be one of my favorites. And I love the fact that it's, they termed it as a German requiem instead of, it's not a church requiem, right? And so for me, it's really about community and people. And, someone is gone, and this is about caring for those who have been left behind. And that's really what the Brahms Requiem is all about.
I just sang that last Wednesday, actually. That's what my rehearsal was for. And that was the first major work that I ever sang in high school. I had the opportunity to sing in a community chorus as like a choral scholar. And I use an iPad for my scores these days, but I went back to my score, and it was so special to open that at such a different place. And inside on the cover, I had Janine Gravesmill written, who was my grandmother. And I was able to add another name to the front of my score for a grandfather who'd passed since then. And remembering them, but also remembering my amazing family that's here. And we got to movement 6, and I was like, this is so cool. There's just something about that piece. I hope to go find that recording of you doing that, because I can only imagine that is so stellar and very.
There's no recording out there, I'm sure. It was probably on an old, whatever they were at that point. But I will tell you, I always had my students write reflections after concerts, and I told them that they could, put their names on them or not. Didn't matter to me. I just wanted to have a sense of what the experience was like for them. And I had a student who lost his dad during that time, and I didn't know it. And this was what helped to heal him. It was amazing to read that afterwards. So you never know, right? You never know.
And that's the power of this music. That's why we do this. Also, great teaching that you just exhibited by having a post-concert reflection. I'm a big fan always.
So our final number from the Fast Five is rather silly. We have a lot of young teachers out there listening to the podcast. And, a lot of times we make mistakes or something goofy happens. So do you have a choral blooper from your career that you would be willing to share with the people today?
Oh, I'm sure there have been many. Let me think.
This is the one that gives people the most trouble, so you're not alone.
Yeah. I am sure that, something like I looked to the accompanist to give pitches on a piece that was accompanied or something like that. Or I know that my colleague, the one I talked about that I came first to Cal Poly, we always teased him because he started a concert and had never given the pitches. And so the students were like, oh, all over the place. So we used to tease him on that. So I can't own his choral blooper, but I always remember it. And so that's why I would always write on my score, give pitches.
Absolutely.
I'm writing turn page, stand still.
Oh, yeah, always. And you know what? When I taught conducting with my students, I told them the same thing, because they would start in a conducting class and I'd be like, how do you expect them to sing? And so I would say to them, you need to write down everything you can to help you. So young people out there who are listening, write down everything you need. It's fine.
Well, we are just so grateful for you and your time and the impact that you have had on this field, not only musically, but administratively, that has impacted so much music. And I know that there are, generations of musicians out there who have much, much gratitude to you. And we are just a small part of that.
Thank you. It's really quite an honor to be asked to do this and to, reflect back upon my career as well, especially today, right? on that announcement day.
We were like, this is perfect timing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's terrible timing. We'll find out.
Oh, no, it's perfect. I am extremely proud of, my time at Cal Poly. So
we are too. Well, thank you so much, Iris. That will forever be terrifying to call you that, Dr. Levine.
So the students that sing for me still in Vox, because I still have some students, they're like, nah, I can't do it. I'll just keep calling you Dr. Levine. That's just the opposite. But that's just the opposite of when I first started, right?
Yes.
So here
we are, full circle, or
Full
just
circle
a
moment.
180, and that's okay. We can
Yep.
stay on that side.
Yep.
Well, if
All
you
right.
have not seen our social media, please check us out. We are at
Will do.
conduct.heardpod on Instagram and at conduct.her on Facebook. And thank you one more time, Dr. Levine, for being here. You are so wonderful.
Thanks so much for listening.
This has been
Conductor.